The Guardians of the Forge served for decades as protectors to the Sapphire Guild miners and their families. To honor the guards who fell in combat, the Guild created a final resting place for their dwarven brothers and sisters, burying it deep in a mountain where it would never be found.
Hey everybody, Jim the Tabletop Engineer here, and welcome to a new episode. If you watched the last episode, you saw me make a small prototype of a bit of fixed terrain that I'm wanting to build for my wargaming needs. Now, it is something that I could use probably as a one-off in a D&D game or a fantasy role-playing game, but once my players see it, it's going to be kind of weird to use it again. And also, it's kind of big, so I'm not really sure if it would be something that I would want to carry to my local gaming store. What this really is, though, for me, is it is a piece of large, three-dimensional terrain that is all glued down, and when I'm ready to play, pull it down, and it's ready to go. Now, this one has sort of a theme of a dwarven tomb, multiple levels, and things like that. And I'm about halfway done with it. So in this video, I'm going to show you the making of the first floor and the second floor, the columns that are used to raise the second floor. I don't want to repeat myself a lot, so in this video, you'll see how I sort of lay out the pattern for the flooring and how I paint it. So in the next video, I'll probably skip over a lot of that and just do time-lapse and stuff like that. But I really hope you enjoy this. I'm looking at it over here to my left, and it's half done, and I just want to play on it so bad, and it's only half done. So when this thing is at its full height, it's going to be really a nice piece of terrain to play a game of Frostgrave on, or Relicblade, or whatever. So let's get to the tabletop, and I will show you how I started putting this massive piece of terrain together. I began this project with a 30-inch by 30-inch piece of foam, 1 inch thick, and I created a stamp in a Tinkercad that I used and printed with a 3D printer that you can see here. This stamp has a pattern on it that I will repeat all over this piece of foam. What I've basically got is 3 paths that run left to right, and 3 more paths that run north to south or up and down, however you want to say it. And these paths will crisscross one another, and then between the paths will be these squares that later on I'll paint probably a dark gray or some other color. Now right here, what you can do is you can see me pressing down really hard on this template. It's not cutting into the foam, okay? You have to do that with a blade. And here's the pattern. If you look on the sheet of paper, you can see where I'm doing the crisscross. So this was sort of time consuming. It takes a lot of time and energy to press all these stamps down. And even then, you've got to go and you've got to cut if this is what you intend to do, which is to put a gap or like a grout line between all the patterns. You have to go and you have to cut that with a blade. So right now what I'm doing is I'm finishing up the stamping of the various patterns, and each stamp has, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8 different cuts on it. So I take a blade, and here I am just cutting straight lines, and in a minute you'll see that I use a ballpoint pen, and I stick it in the line right here, and I just drag it down, and basically it just widens the cut, makes it a little more pronounced. Then you go and you take the blade and you separate all the different 4-inch by 4-inch stamps, because I want to have a grout line between those as well. And then finally, once those are done, you have to go and individually you'll cut each of the diagonal lines that make this pattern. It's very time consuming, very tedious. But in the end, it really makes it pop out instead of just not cutting the lines and painting the pattern on. So here I am just making more and more of the patterns, cutting the line, using a pen to widen it, and cutting the diagonal lines. I did this in sections to keep it from becoming too tedious, and I took lots of breaks. I highly recommend taking lots of breaks on something like this, especially if you're going to be painting all of this stuff. Now, all the tiles were cut. I took a hot wire foam cutter, a wire cutter, and I just dragged it along the edge at an angle to give it a rough edge. And then I used a ball of aluminum foil to roughen up the top surface. After that, I black bombed the entire thing. I'm time-lapsing this, but this took a little while. It's a big piece, 30 inches by 30 inches.
Each month, Beckham's Bizarre RPG and Wargaming magazine provides gamers with articles, props to print and cut out for players, mini adventures, new monsters, and much more. Look in the description below for details on how to get a few free issues so you can see what you're missing.
Next, I used some apple barrel pool blue paint, and I used this to paint the large blue octagonal shapes in there. And then I used Treasure Gold Fire Opal, which is my new favorite color. It's a metallic from plaid. And I just took this and I painted all of the triangular pieces that make up the pattern. I did this all by hand. This is floor number 1, and it's still not done yet. After all the triangles were done, I painted the inside squares with a dark gray. And then I sponge painted using the Fire Opal again in those gray areas. Next, I created the second floor, and it's basically the exact same process, although these are going to be 24 inches by 10 inches, and there's 2 of them. Each one of them will have a single line of the pattern running lengthwise. So here I am drawing the top line and the bottom line so that I'll have something to follow so that the pattern is centered. And I use a pen and a blade to widen those lines. And then I just took the stamp and I went right down the entire length of it. It's 24 inches, so I'll get 6 of these patterns inside that line. And just like the bigger piece, after that is done, you have to cut all the lines individually, use a pen to widen them. Here I am roughening up with a ball of aluminum. Oh, and I also trimmed the corners. It looked better rather than straight rectangles. I trimmed these at an angle before black bombing. And then I black bombed and hit it again with the blue paint. 2 coats of the pool blue. Let the first one dry, and then hit it again because the black will show through. Then I took some time to make the columns that will support the second floor. These are all 1 inch by 1 inch squares or lengths. And then I cut each one of them to a length of 4 inches. And then I used 1/2 inch foam to create a top base and a bottom base. And these bases were slightly beveled using the Proxxon cutter at an angle. And then when I glue them on, each column is roughly 5 inches in height. You can see the bevel right there in the freeze frame. So just put some glue on one, smear it against the other, and then stack the columns. And then what I did was I took a blade and did a little damage, just chipped them here and there to give them a little character. And then I used another treasure gold called blue quartz, which is a metallic, and I painted the columns with that as well. I went back to the second floor and I painted the top paths left to right this dark gray again. And I also painted the edges with that blue quartz paint that you're going to see in just a second. I used a smaller paintbrush to do the detail to get real close so I didn't mess anything up, and used the Fire Opal to hit the triangles again. And again, I did this all by hand, and it really looks nice with a thick, heavy black line. Hit the edges with the blue quartz, let it dry, give it a second coat because it really needs it. And then I sponge painted with the Fire Opal on both sides of both pieces. The heavy black line, by the way, gives it this sort of cartoonish look. I really was going for that. I wanted a heavy black line. So when I was painting, I intentionally left a black gap between the blue and the Fire Opal and any other colors, so that black line, it's not really paint down in there, it is black on the surface of the foam. I painted the bottom of the second floor white so that the light would reflect off it and allow you to see better underneath the structure. Put some glue on top of the columns and then put these two pieces down and weigh them down with some weights. That is floors 1 and 2. In the next video, I'll finish it up with floors 3 and 4. But I really hope I hope you like this. I hope it inspires you to make something maybe like it on your own. You don't have to go this grand. You could build something smaller. But the key here is I did not want to start building this thing without that prototype to give me an idea of what it was going to look like when it was all said and done. And also, like, the viewing angles, as I mentioned. I want my opponent and myself to be able to see where you can hide and see the areas that might provide difficulty of moving miniatures around. And so far, that prototype has really helped me to get this defined. And right now, the floors are about 5.5 inches tall, which is plenty of room to get your hand in there and move minis and things like that. If you decide to do something like this, always go to the Tabletop Engineer Facebook page and post some photos there. If you have any questions about this, post them in the comments below and I'll do my best to respond to them. And then finally, I welcome you to come and join us on the Tabletop Engineer Facebook page, where we do all kinds of discussions and post photos and questions and comments and stuff like that. So it's just a fun place to hang out. But let me also promote the Tabletop Crafters Guild. I am a member. I am also one of the guild masters. It is a 30,000+ group that is growing strong every week. It seems like we're adding hundreds of members. People really, really still enjoy the 3D and the crafting aspect of our gaming hobby. And so it's just a great place to share what you're making, share what you're playing, ask questions, things like that. So come join us over there at the Tabletop Crafters Guild as well. That's it. This is Jim, the Tabletop Engineer. I will see you again next week. Take care.